Welcome to the Rundown, everybody. I'm Sunny Galt. I'm a messenger with United Network News. If this is your first time listening to our podcast, welcome. You guys are in for a treat. We're talking about a lot of fun stuff today. UNN is the official news channel for CARE. CARE stands for the Center for Amity and Restoration of Earth. And we discuss the real news. And we don't just talk about the things that everybody else is talking about, the mainstream media, the alternative media. Most of that information is all coming from the same source, and it is intentionally put out there to confuse you and to distract you. And our intention is to do the exact opposite. We want to tell you what's really happening on our planet and even elsewhere. Some of the news that we're going to talk about today isn't even happening on our planet, but it's still important stuff that you need to know. Now, we have a newscast that's released through our online distribution platform, and it comes out every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. It is membership-based, so you do need to pay to have full access to everything. But that's one of the reasons that we're doing this podcast is some information needs to get out there. And of course, we want to educate and inform as much as possible. And if you want more information on anything that we're talking about today, you can go to unitednetwork.tv. That's where you can sign up. And there's even a free 3-day trial if you want to give it a go. So on this podcast, we highlight some of the stories that we cover on our newscast. That's why it's called The Rundown. We're running down some of the stories. And we talk about local stories. We do that through our field messengers, which I'll explain in just a second. We also cover world stories, and we like to point out not just what's happening in the world, but the story behind the story. Because usually the headlines you're given are what they want you to think, and it has a certain narrative, but you can kind of read between the lines, and we try to educate you on how to do that. And then at the end of the episode, we have, of course, our World Situation Report with Kimberly Gogan. And that is where we're going to talk about some stuff that is not on this planet, but also there's some politics that are sprinkled in there. But this is very high level stuff. In fact, we have access to the highest security clearance on the planet. And we know things that the government doesn't even know, because the government, a lot of people think like the government is the head of your country. That is not the case at all. You would never know who the people are that were running everything. A lot of them are gone now. A lot of them have been eliminated. But this was a very long chain of command, and we have access to all of the information from the very, very, very tippy top. Some of the information we talk about in all of our episodes, and especially today in the World Situation Report, may be very surprising to you. And you may be wondering, what in the world are they saying? I've never heard anyone else talk about this kind of stuff. How could this possibly be true? And if this is the first time you're hearing this kind of stuff, I get it, okay? And I was in your shoes just, 2 to 3 years ago. I've done a lot of learning and education since then. But my encouragement to you is to just stick with this. Even if things, are a bit confusing, stick with us. And I also encourage you guys, after you listen to this episode, do your own research. Stop believing people just because they have a podium or, they're on TV or have a podcast even and appear to have some sort of authority. Because let me tell you what, my grandma can create a podcast. That is not a good reason to believe somebody. And there is so much misinformation, disinformation out there. What is truth is being called lies and vice versa. And so we have to think critically. We have to rely on our own discernment, and we have to ask questions. Don't just accept things. Don't just accept anything I say on this podcast. Do your research. Before we get into the news, I do have a couple quick announcements. First, we announced on today's newscast that we are no longer going to be covering stories about the government or non-governmental organizations unless it somehow impacts the people. So this is the last time you're really going to hear me talk about stories that are just government-based. Unless we can see a direct impact on the people as a result, like a bill has been passed, the cost of stamps are going up, whatever, then we'll run the story. But most of the headlines out there right now, this is very interesting because, I look at a lot of headlines and I'm trying to determine what stories are we going to run on the news. And if you look really closely, you'll see that all of the stories, so much of the stories are government focused. And there's always like a plug in there to get you to think that the government's actually doing stuff, and then you have these stories of just random thoughts or ideas that someone from the government is saying. It has no bearing on the people. It's just someone's opinion, and it's used to stir people up. So when you really start to analyze the headlines out there, you can get rid of a lot of stuff just by doing exactly what we're doing, and that's getting rid of the government and non-governmental stuff. Like, you don't need it. They're a bunch of liars, and we're going to dive into that today, just how far they will go to step all over humanity, and we're just done with it. So we are not going to be reporting on that anymore. But we do have a lot of other good news to share with you, so let's get going. This is the rundown for Wednesday, September 6, 2023. All right, we start off today's newscast, as we do all of our newscasts, with what we call our field messenger reports. We rely on people in their own communities to tell us what is happening in their community. Sometimes people call this citizen journalists or reporters. I don't know. Those kind of terms are a little too stuffy for me. It comes with a lot of baggage. I actually come from the news business. That's what I was trained in. And I can see the difference between something that is kind of, set up and something that's more authentic. So our field messenger reports are literally, you guys are our boots on the ground, sharing what's really going on in your community because you know your community's best. And so we like to kick off our newscasts with stories that come in from our field messengers. And we have field messengers all over the world. And our goal is at some point, hopefully in the very near future, that we will have tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of people submitting reports. And we have a ton of stories that come in every day, which is fantastic. And then we have a team of people that edit the stories together, and they make you look as amazing as you should with the information that you've given us. So 2 stories to go over today. And by the way, if you want to see the full story, you can go to unitednetwork.news. There's a field messenger section. You can watch these even without a subscription or a membership plan. So this is always going to be free. We're just, we're really grateful and happy that people submit these stories, and we think it should be free. So you can watch it there. And there's also information on the website about becoming a field messenger. So if you want to give it a go, then we've got some tips for you. And we also have a Telegram group you can join and ask questions. And I'll tell you about that at the end of today's episode. So 2 reports today. The first one is from Belinda, and she is in Minnesota in the U.S. And we have talked about this topic a little bit in the past. Have you ever heard of the no-dig gardening method? So we talk about gardening a lot, and not just gardening like, oh, look at my pretty flowers, but it's more about growing your own food, because this is one of the control mechanisms that they have had over us for a very long time. And if you don't already know this, they have literally been poisoning our food for a long time and profiting off of it. It gets really extensive and sad and all of that. But what you can do is you can buy locally. You can buy from farmers markets, people you know, and you can grow your own food. And it's not as difficult as you might think. So we do a lot of gardening, or growing your own food kind of stories. The no-dig gardening method is, I think it's nice for people that, it's in the name. They don't want to do a lot of digging. And that is, instead of like going underneath the soil you already have, you either create boxes or somehow you put dirt on the ground and you build from the surface up, if that makes sense. So a lot of times they're like wooden boxes that people build, and sometimes they use cardboard. And so Belinda was showing us her raised garden beds, and she explains how she does it. And then the focus of this was a little bit different because she is talking about how in Minnesota, they are experiencing a drought. So she has a DIY irrigation system. And of course, she shows us her amazing vegetables that are growing. She's got some beautiful bees and butterflies and cool things like that. So that's our first Field Messenger report. And then we head on over to Sweden and we meet Susan, who is in an area, it's called Öland, and it's an island in the Baltic Sea. And I love this piece. It's really informative. So this island has a ton of limestone. And Susan basically goes into this history lesson of how this limestone came to be. And it was formed in all the different layers. It's very scientific, actually. She shows us some of the fossils that were captured in the stone. She says this happened like 450 million years ago, which my brain can't quite comprehend. But it's a beautiful piece. So if you guys want to check those out, again, on unitednetwork.news. And let's talk a little bit about some world stories. There's 4 different stories that we're going to go over today. The first was one that I just thought was super inspiring. There are 2 prominent firms in Scotland. So they're Scottish firm. I believe one is a steel stockholder, like they're a prominent player in that area. Another one is an accounting firm. Anyway, they have changed the structure of their company. They have transitioned over to being an employee-owned company. I guess their owners are planning their retirement, and they think that this is the best for the future of the companies. Now, this is one of those more feel-good stories. I don't know if anyone that's listening to this has been in a position where you've owned a part of the company that you work for, but it is an entirely different experience. And in this report, we talk about some of those benefits. It's known to increase resilience during economic downturns. It improves people's productivity and their profitability. And it also encourages higher employee engagement. There's like a million different reasons why people should do this. And it kind of reminds me of like when you own a home versus you rent a home. Like you treat the home better when you have more invested in it. And it's the same thing with this kind of employee ownership. So I wanted to bring up that story. We may have some business owners listening to this episode right now. It might be something to consider moving forward. We are moving away from this mentality of we have to own everything. Because we're scared, because really that's where that comes from. It's a level of fear that someone's going to take something from you. But we're moving into this new age, which we're going to talk about in the situation report, where that fear is going to be leaving. And it should have already really started by now. And so we're going to look at things a little bit differently, and we're going to share more, not in like, the World Economic Forum, you're going to own nothing and be happy. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a genuine trust of humanity and wanting to share with other people because it just makes you feel good. And so I wanted to bring that story up because it's such a beautiful example of that. The other stories, not so beautiful, but we're going to get to them anyways. So we kind of had this funny, I'll call it a funny piece. I don't know if it's really all that funny. It's really more sad. So Mitch McConnell, from Congress. As you know, dear Mitch has been having some struggles lately where he has like frozen. He's like in the middle of a sentence and he just freezes. It's like he's got a glitch or something going on. And so it leaves us asking the question, what is going on with Mitch? Now, if you haven't listened to our newscast before, you probably won't be able to answer that question. It's probably just going to look like, an elderly person that is having some issues. It's getting older and having some issues. And granted, that could happen. That is not the case with Mr. Mitch. Okay, we've talked about this on previous world situation reports. And again, this is very high level stuff, guys. Essentially, there were, I should say, brain chips. These people, and when I say these people, it's very prominent people in the world. In fact, we estimated that about 50% of U.S. Congress had these brain chips in their head. This is real. Okay, this isn't like some sci-fi fantasy thing. This is a very real thing. They had these brain chips in their head, and it would greatly influence their behavior. So I'm not sure if someone was dictating what they should say. I'm not sure if it gave the people controlling these politicians and prominent people complete access to do whatever they wanted to do. I'm not sure of the specifics. But the point being that these brain chips, once we found them, once we found them, we turned them off. And we didn't take them out of anyone's head or anything like that. But there was essentially, for lack of a better term, an off switch that you could use remotely through the computer systems we have access to. And these brain chips were turned off. And when that happened, we started to see all this stuff, that these malfunctioning people. And honestly, Mitch is malfunctioning. He is one of those people who had one of these chips. It is no longer turned on. And I mean, they're doing their best to hold this person together, but he is all over the place. So it's a really scary thing, but it's very real. So we have a story about another situation where Mitch just freezes. In fact, it was kind of ironic because I believe the question the reporter asked him was about, is he running for re-election? And he just freezes. He has no idea what the person's saying. He's kind of mumbling a little bit, and eventually an aide leads him off the stage or whatever. So there's Mitch McConnell for you. Next, let's move on over to New Zealand. I want to talk about the Prime Minister of New Zealand. His name is Chris Hipkins. And if you recall, New Zealand and Australia, but I believe New Zealand was hit even worse, with a ton of restrictions during COVID. I mean, the people could not leave their homes. They were restricted how far away they could go and where they could go. I mean, essentially, they were in prison. But now, their Prime Minister, Chris Hipkins, he's now saying that the COVID vaccine was not compulsory in his country. Compulsory just means it was required. He's saying it was never required, despite the mandates. Now, if you look up the word mandate, because that word was thrown around a lot during COVID. If you look up the word, the definition is an authoritative command or instruction. So what Hippie Hipkins is saying over here is that, listen, it came from an authoritative person, mainly himself, saying you should get it, but it was not required. The problem is most people, when a politician like a prime minister says you've got to do something, the natural conclusion there is if you don't, there's going to be punishment. And for the people of New Zealand, absolutely there was. And for people all over the world, people lost their jobs. People couldn't go into grocery stores. There was a definite downside to not getting this experimental, quote unquote, vaccine. But now he's going back on his words. And the reason he's doing this is in New Zealand, there are calls to now compensate people who were negatively impacted by the vaccines. So not just like I had an adverse reaction to the vaccine, but I lost my job or, something like that. And so Chris Hipkins' response is, oh, no, we don't have to compensate you because it was not compulsory. And honestly, we've seen this in the headlines already. He's not the first politician to say this. This is going to happen more and more. This is them backtracking and hoping that you don't remember. But I know for the people in New Zealand, they remember because they were stuck in their homes. So, I don't know where he thinks he's going with this, but it's pretty bold to get up on a stage and say that, oh, we didn't make you take these vaccines when that's exactly what they tried to do. Okay, final story is about Meta, which is the company that, is the founding company or, the head company over Facebook, okay? So Meta, you're going to start to see different headlines about them involving news publishers because more and more people are catching on to these lies, right? They're putting two and two together. They're seeing these prime ministers say, oh, I never said that. And now the news is getting a little bit more bold, which is encouraging. And they're reporting on this. And Meta, aka Facebook, doesn't like that too much. So what you're seeing is they're starting to retaliate a little bit. So the story here is that Meta is removing Facebook news tabs in Europe. So I haven't been on Facebook in several years, but I do think there's some sort of tab that you can click on and see a bunch of news. So in Europe, they're planning to remove that. And then they're also doing something else. They're ending the UK local journalism funding project. So that gave a lot of money to different journalism resources. You know, you become kind of dependent, you know, after that's been going on for a while, and they're all of a sudden just ending it. And news publishers are saying that a combination of this is reducing traffic to their websites, which is impacting their income, and they're not happy about it. And now they're saying that they have doubts about Facebook's commitment to what they're calling reliable information, which, you know, you kind of get. Now, I've always said, you know, don't put all your eggs in one basket. You know, I coach podcasters and things like that, and people are like, oh, I don't need a website. My podcast is on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whatever. And I'm always telling them, yes, you do, because you don't know what these third-party sites are going to do with your content. They could ban you, you know, in a day. And then that is a big source of your revenue that's just gone. So this article for me hits pretty close to home, because this is something that I preach about all the time. You need to have a home base that you can control. And that's what these journalists are finding, is that so much of their traffic was coming from Facebook. So Facebook, you know, pulls the switch on something and suddenly their revenue is shot. And to me, it seems like Facebook is trying to, you know, make an example or send some sort of a message. And this is what kills me. So in the article, it says Facebook, or Meta, okay, says, quote, this is a quote, news is not the primary reason for Facebook usage, which I find hysterical. Okay, first of all, define news, because news is the very reason that people get on Facebook. They may not be looking for articles from various news organizations, but they want to know what's going on. That's news. So I just find this quote from Meta hysterical. You know, obviously they're going to keep getting slammed for this. There's no way they can come out ahead, but you're going to see more and more of this, more restrictions on journalists that have the ability and the courage to stand up and call a spade, because there's some very nefarious stuff going on right now, and people are blatantly lying to the public, and it is up to journalists to call that out. But when they do, this kind of stuff happens. In today's World Situation Report, we have a couple different stories we're going to talk about. One is more focused on politics and what the crazy people are trying to do, what's really happening behind the scenes. And then there is another one that is a little more worldly, a little bit, and is actually even beyond the world. It's really more about the entire multiverse. And it has to do with time and what we call the end of the ages cycle. We're going to get to that in just a second. But first, let's talk about what's going on with the government. Now, if you've seen our newscast before, you know that Kimberly Gogan from the Office of the Guardian, she is the one that comes on and basically gives us an update on what's happening throughout the planet and even beyond the planet. And she, again, is from the Office of the Guardian. This is a very real position. Other people have had this position in the past. She's not the first one. She didn't, create this position or anything like that. But her job right now is to help us transition into a light timeline, a light period of time. And we've been living in a very dark period for many thousands of years. And we're in this transition. The problem is there's a lot of people that were kind of running the show, at least they thought they were running the show, and they are still trying to get us to go towards a dark timeline. And so you've got this struggle right now, and the light side has already won, but the dark side doesn't want to give up. In fact, I don't even know if all of them really know that they've lost. If they know that they've lost, They are still running themselves off a cliff and doing really silly stuff, as you're going to find out in just a couple minutes. So Kimberly started CARE. CARE stands for the Center for Amity and Restoration of Earth. CARE is ultimately going to replace the United Nations, not the bad side of the United Nations, because United Nations that we know of today is a terrorist group, okay? But as far as helping the planet and doing things for the entire world, that's what CARE is set up to do. And right now, what Kimberly is doing on behalf of CARE is trying to work with the current governments to see what side they're on, okay? Because a lot of these people, they didn't really know how the planet was run. And everything was compartmentalized. So the people at the very, very, very top, you never knew who those people were. And quite frankly, at the very, very top, they weren't even human. But as you go down, everyone thinks that they're the person at the top, and they don't realize that, there's many, many, many different layers here, and you just know what you need to know with your little section. So if you're going to change the world, you have to start removing these people at the top, of which most of the politicians and people we're going to talk about today didn't even know they existed. So the people that we're talking about today, mainly the governments and the people that are trying to control the governments, they are now trying to rule the world, and they're trying to carry out this plan that they have been given. And the plan is for the United States to basically hand over world power to China. That was supposed to happen this year. I believe back in April is when the handoff was supposed to happen. It didn't happen, right? I know we see a lot of stuff about China in the news, but that handoff didn't happen. And they're not too happy with this, and it's causing a lot of problems because this was not the plan. And now they don't know what to do. So this first soundbite that we're going to listen to, it's going to explain this story that is going around in the alternative media right now. And that is regarding a 21 trillion, with a T, $trillion check that somebody is offering to pay off the U.S. debt, which might sound good on the surface. But what they're planning to do with this, it's a huge mess. Now, a little bit of background information. CARE, okay, the Center for Amity and Restoration of Earth, transferred, so Kim did it on behalf of CARE. She transferred $23 trillion to the U.S. Department of Treasury to an account that they could see. They couldn't actually access it. But she was trying to prove that she has the money to be able to transfer to these governments because she's trying to get the governments to work with us to rebuild the planet for restoration and all of that. They're still convinced they're going down this dark timeline, okay? Right now, they're still making poor choices, but this $23 trillion was just sitting in this account. And now we are hearing about somebody paying off $21 trillion to pay off the U.S. debt. I'll let Kim explain.
Someone, somewhere, has written a $21 trillion check. This same someone allegedly is demanding that the debt of the United States must be written off with this $21 trillion check. I'm guessing it's kind of like a short sale situation because the debt of the U.S., let's just say, was much higher than that. Next, they would like to file a $999 trillion, oh yes, you heard me right, almost a quadrillion dollar lien against all the in-ground assets in all of the U.S. states. And these are the conditions they set for releasing, which nobody's talking to me again, I repeat, okay, for releasing this money that they think they have access to, or they were going to try to get access again, I'm guessing. And then they were going to come to me eventually and try to make a deal, thinking that perhaps I wouldn't know what's going on. So the real deal is this. The reason why the number went from 23 to 21 is because all of the operatives / aides in Washington, D.C. had made a deal for themselves by talking to themselves and possibly some Jesuits that they would actually receive $2 trillion in pay. The kickback would also include people like Mitch McConnell, because he's doing a great job there, Schumer, of course, the Biden administration, whoever that is now, and Duck Dynasty, the Trump operatives. You would also have pretty much McCarthy's operatives and McCarthy. They were all going to profit themselves personally from this $2 trillion. They wanted to take our money. Remember, I told you to issue derivatives or bonds, you needed 10%. Mm-hmm. And they were going to monetize all the in-ground assets of the United States and trade against those assets, derivatives and bonds. Now, let's talk about this harebrained, ridiculous scheme. If I take, okay, so they were going to leverage it over 100 times. So now that's bringing us to 100 quad. Oh, yes. You are just infinitely the smartest people on earth. Okay, so 100 quad in issuance of bonds against in-ground. I'm trying to do this with a straight face, guys. I really am, honestly. 100 quadrillion. Now, the GDP of planet Earth is somewhere around 100 trillion on every given year. That's for an entire year. The entire amount of money in circulation isn't anywhere in the realm. I mean, every currency in every country of the entire planet Earth doesn't even come close to that. Not even in the neighborhood. Like probably not even on the same continent as 100 quad. Now, here's how trading works. Jesuit people and Congress people. Let me break it down with little tiny words for you. Who is going to buy 100 quadrillion worth of bonds?
Anything, yeah.
Now, how this used to work back in the day when these types of things, not to that magnitude, used to work, they would all come through the ANNA, or the Association of Numerical Numbering Agency in Belgium, and then they would come into my desk, technically my predecessor's desk at the time, and then we would end up buying the bonds. Mm-hmm. Because there's not that much money in circulation, even in the neighborhood, and you have no authority to issue new money, and you couldn't even buy it if you added all crypto coins and Dogecoin or whatever it's called, and XRP and Bitcoin, and you put them all together in a pile, your new USTC coin that you wanted. Even if you put them all together in a pile, your USTC coin, now let's get to the next part of it. Supply and demand. Money works on supply and demand regardless of the amount of assets that back the currency. Those are the two factors that always come into play. So your USTC coin or XRP or whatever currency you thought you were going to issue against all these in-ground assets would be worth like 0.0000000000075, something like that. 0.000.
So why do it, Kim? Like, what's the deal? Do they just need a lesson in economics or what?
I've tried. Okay, so this comes where my frustration comes in. I have actually spent hours on the phone with people trying to educate them. I did it with the military. I did it with the Treasury Department. I've even done it with these people that are involved in this scamorama. Mm-hmm. And I've laid it out. I've used a whiteboard. I've used small words. I don't know what else I can do to educate these people on economics. Mm-hmm. The world of finance does not work even in this realm.
So, guys, these are the people that want to rule the world, but they obviously have no idea how economics works. And they want to pay themselves these ridiculous amounts, which would bring the dollar or whatever currency they're trading into nothing. But it's like they don't think these things through. I don't know. Maybe they have the chip. I don't know. the malfunction chip. Something is definitely going on there. Okay, so let's talk about something that is a little off planet, okay? It does involve our planet, but involves the whole multiverse, actually, and that is the end of the ages cycle. Now, when we talk about time, which time, using that term is kind of hard because time, for us, when we think about time, it's really an illusion, okay? But there are periods where certain things were supposed to happen, okay? And they're called ages. So we had these 4 ages that affected all densities, planets, and beings. And this is how the creator, God, source, whatever you want to call him or her, whatever, this is how everything was set up, okay? You had these 4 different ages, and some were neutral, and there was one that was light and one that was dark. Well, the Kali Yuga is what is commonly referred to as the dark age. That is the very last one, and that is the one that we are wrapping up right now. But here's something that's interesting. We are actually ahead of schedule in wrapping this up. It wasn't supposed to happen until about a year from now in September of 2024. But we are ahead of schedule, and it's not just the Earth. It is planets all over the universe because we all affect one another through frequency, through our vibration, and we support each other and we can help each other. And it really is a beautiful thing. And we have all chosen collectively to go toward this light timeline. But in this newscast, we break down these different ages and what it means, especially for the people that are running around doing crazy stuff, because the dark matter is clearing. And now these people are being given a choice. They have a very important decision to make. Here's Kim.
We talked about timelines, and we've talked about what Vedic cosmology calls the yugas.
Yes.
And we talked about how the Council of Nine was the managers of the yugas for a long time. But the origin of the ages, and of which there are 4, there are 2 neutral, 1 dark, and 1 light, actually was an agreement at the very beginning of creation between source and what you would call anti-source. So it was basically one, source, dark and light. Yep. And the ages were created with multiple timelines contained therein in order to keep the balance of the universe. So ages affected all densities, all planets, all places, all beings. And once you understand that, then the next part is going to make sense to you. So there are people that talk about the yugas, and they estimate that we wouldn't be out of the Kali Yuga, which is the what they call it. It's actually the dark age until 50, 30, 40 some odd years from now. But that's actually not true. So coming out of dark timelines and moving into light timelines, and then eventually changing the amount of light that not only exists on this planet, but throughout the entire multiverse, removal of the dial of destiny and a lot of other things that we've done, and we've talked about all of this, has actually led as a universe, multiverse, for us to actually move into the light age. So what does that mean? That means we began the transitionary period on Monday. So
this past Monday.
This is the real reason why I wasn't on the news. It wasn't because I was talking to slimy politicians and aides and weird people. It was because of this. So it happened sooner than expected. So when I say we're ahead of schedule, this transition was not supposed to take place until 2024. But based on long work days and cleaning and clearing and changing and a lot of people going away, like our covens and all of that. Plus, there's a lot of movement and a lot of change throughout the multiverse. You know, think about how many solar systems are out there, how many beings are out there. You know, we're all collectively changing things. You know, you have a bunch of weirdos on this planet, granted, you know, who think they should be in power, granted, but those are not affecting the collective multiverse. They'd like to, but they're not.
Yep.
So that transition should probably, and this is a guess, because it wasn't supposed to happen until September, the fall equinox in 2024 is when it was supposed to happen. By being ahead of schedule, it has started to happen earlier. Now, because this was a source thing, and we only have one now, we only have a light creator, that can change at any moment based on what source wanted. So based on all the cleaning and the clearing and all the things that have happened, not only here on Earth, and not only, you know, obviously I'm not the only person in the multiverse doing this. Yeah. We've actually been able, collectively as a group, been able to back it up until September 23rd, 2023.
Okay.
Now we hit a precipice point on Monday, and we had tipped the scales days early because it's only a couple of weeks early. So it was obviously there was a request placed, not only by me, by a lot of folks in the Universal Council and a number of people, to request to start moving into the light age and to end the ages agreement. Totally. And by the next day, we were granted that request and began the transition on Monday. So this is good news, not only for us, but throughout the multiverse. When we say we already won, and we've been saying this for a couple of years, based on the calculations of everything that's happening, it looked like, not only here, but everywhere, all densities, all planes, that we would be able to transition to the light. That's what that meant. Now, this is the fourth and final age.
I was just going to ask that, you know, because you said that there were 4 ages. So what was the order, I guess? Did we have neutral, dark, light? Is that, and we're at the end?
It was light, neutral, dark. Yeah, it was neutral because remember we started out with balance.
Yeah.
Okay, so that would be neutral.
Okay.
Then we moved into a light timeline.
A light timeline.
And then we moved to another neutral timeline, or as age. I'm sorry, not timeline, age.
Okay.
And then we spent thousands of years there. And then we moved into what you call the Kali Yuga, which is the dark age. Dark
and now
ages.
That's ending, or is technically, I guess,
correct. Because we've already.
So that's why we can wrap it up. Is the 4 ages? We've been there, done that.
That's also a source call. That was also a source call.
Okay.
So we're not violating anything anyway because we've just made it to the end of the age. We just happened to complete everything that needed to be completed in order to make that transition fully by Monday.
Okay.
And when I say we, and I'm not talking about just you and I or others here on this planet, I'm talking about everywhere. This was a collective effort.
Yep.
So this is really good news for us. But where it becomes confusing for our cabal friends, non-friends, we broke up. Are those that believe it's their job to anchor darkness on this planet. Mm-hmm. So we were not the only planet with anchors of darkness. Many planets throughout the densities, all the way up to the fifth density, had anchors of darkness on those planets.
Okay.
Based on the age that we were in, based on timelines that we were in, it was their job. So we've talked about the ceremonies that take place on the bloodline family's 40th birthday.
Yes.
This is officially when they are committed, because the decision is made by the age of 8.
The decision, like
say,
the person makes the decision, or someone makes the decision for the person?
There's a way that they test, God knows what it is, that whether you are going to be a light anchor or a dark anchor.
Okay.
Because we could go either way. And this is not a test that's done here. It's not like some family member puts a probe in some other family member's whatever at 8, and decides what this is. It's a, let's just say, the fight between the angels and the demons, so to speak, and the determination is made at that time. And there's also a certain thing that they try to do where they try to turn us. Mm-hmm. They try to turn you. So by the time you're 40 years old, they feel like you've lived long enough, you understand enough to make that decision to be an anchor of darkness. Now, this goes for all the Canaanite Black Sun families, family names. This also goes for the Order of the Dragon, all these secret societies. This is why they do the baby eating and blood thing, and they show their commitment to darkness, into evil. And they agree to become an anchor of darkness. And some of them even do a consciousness switch. So there's a switch where your consciousness goes down below and you get one of their consciousnesses, is that a word? To inhabit you. And you have there's a fusion and a soul binding between you and a lower astral being. I know, it's crazy.
Is that what the Queen had, or did she have something else? Queen Elizabeth.
Well, when you become so that's just for the whole families. All the bloodline families go through this. And then when you become a leader in a bloodline family, that's when you go into stasis and something else completely comes here. These are the shapeshifters that you hear about. These are the people that names you don't even know, the Black nobility, they call them on the one end, and then you have the families of the Illuminati. People like a Pindar would have that. Chucky, that's why Chucky tried to do it, because he became a leader in the families at that point. And that's a little bit more invasive, because you actually go, there is no bit of consciousness left to you of the light, like of your normal organic self at that point. So when they agree to become an anchor, it's part of the reason why they're a little cray-cray. Mm-hmm. Because they have some dark consciousness that's driving their thought processes, and probably said it's a good idea to have 100 quadrillion worth of bonds. I don't know. Maybe that's it. But as part of this transition, the dark matter, remaining dark matter on this side of the multiverse is dissipating. And that includes the dark consciousness in these people and the dark matter in these people. So once it's all completely cleared, now they have to make a decision. There's no one else. There's no one coming. There's no two sides of yourself. I'm not really sure how that all works or would feel if somebody had that issue. But there's none of that will be applicable anymore. So whether they can or they can't. So part of the reason why the Jesuits are going so crazy right now as well is because they know they can't anchor the darkness anymore, that we're becoming too light. And it's literally driving them crazy. Think about making a commitment like that, knowingly, willingly, and then not being able to fulfill your obligation. I mean, I'm guessing that there's some kind of sell your soul covenant, like you die or your family dies or your whole bloodline gets wiped out. Pass? I don't know. But one thing is clear is you're still alive, now, and you'll be alive still in a few days. And the conversation, that I had with Source was a little bit twofold. So obviously, if these people continue to make poor decisions after they realize that agreement has been terminated or covenant has been terminated, then, they got to go.
This is based on your conversation with Source.
Yeah, they got to go.
Okay.
But they've also been given an opportunity to exist in this world.
So sometimes it's really frustrating because we're obviously, we're tired of living in the dark. We want to move to the light as quickly as we possibly can. We're also trying to be fair in all of this because, as I mentioned before, their side was so structured and compartmentalized that a lot of these people have been lied to, just like we've been lied to about everything. And, they thought that they were doing good or they didn't really know why they were doing, they were just taking orders. And so I think this is a beautiful thing that Source is doing, that God is doing in giving people another shot, So as this dark matter starts to clear, then hopefully things will move faster because there's a lot of us on the light side that are going, come on, let's move forward. Let's restore because we're right on that precipice. And there's been a lot of restoration that's happened, especially the work that Kim's been doing. But we all, it's like we're part of the team, but we're sitting on the bench and we're like, come on, coach, put me in. Because there's so much that we want to do. For ourselves, for our family, for the people that we love. We want a different type of world. So I'm encouraged by this. I hope you guys are too. Another thing that I'm not going to run a soundbite for this, but I guess a little bit of a teaser for you guys. Kim does talk about the Arcturians. And for some of you, this is going to seem like, oh my gosh, Cindy's going down this weird Star Trek-y kind of thing. The Arcturians are real beings. They are actually 8th density beings. So the 9th density, so one level above, is where God or Source exists. So they are really high up there. A lot of people may even consider these people or beings angels, but they are known to be universal healers. And they are sending a lot of planets a nifty little, let's just call it a package. It's not like a physical package. But they're sending us a gift, and it is passing through the 5th density as we speak. And what it is healing energy. It is light matter or light essence, and it is going to help us with this clearing and this dark matter. And it's like, I feel like this is the final puzzle piece. Kim didn't say that in the World Situation Report, but I feel like we are waiting for this. This is kind of like, okay, you did it. I feel like this is the last puzzle piece that we need in order to do a lot of the restoration projects and things that, it's this dark matter that's been holding us back. And we're at that tail end, right? And this could be it, guys. It could really be it. So if you want to learn more about that, I encourage you guys to actually watch the entire newscast. Kim explains it much better. She's worked directly with the Arcturians before. And you can do that on unitednetwork.tv. If you do end up subscribing, you get all of our on-demand content. That includes the UNN newscasts, the complete world situation reports. We also have some original series and health and wellness videos as well. But what you should do right now, consider everything we've talked about. Do your research. Research some of the stuff we talked about, the end of the ages cycle, research the Kali Yuga, go down some rabbit holes. It's good for you. When you do this, have an open mind. If you come into the situation thinking you know everything, you're going to walk out just as uninformed as you did when you walked in. Keep asking questions, think critically, and share this podcast with people you care about. Because there's a lot of fascinating things that are happening, and you are here to witness it all. How amazing is that? Now, if you want to connect with us, you can do that through Telegram. We have a few different channels I'm going to tell you about. We have the CARE General Updates channel, And there's a lot of stuff that's posted on there about restoration. So that's a great channel to join. Also, we have the United Network News channel if you want to know when our newscasts come out, as well as all of our field messenger reports, not just the ones that make it on the news, but we have other ones, more long-form content that we release separately through our app. All of those updates are on that channel. And then here's a new one that I'm going to tell you about. It's the UNN Field Messenger Group. So if you're interested in becoming a field messenger and you've got some questions or you need some help with your story idea or whatever it is, that's more of a collaborative group where you can ask a lot of questions and post different things and get the support that you need. So I'm going to include the links to all of that in the description for today's episode. All right, guys, I hope that was interesting. I hope it was fun for you. Be encouraged, be enlightened, and go out there and change the world. This is The Rundown, and I'm Sunny Gold for United Network News, signing off.